Well, plenty of debate yesterday about childcare. Well, not yesterday, it goes on and on and on. One simple fact is extraordinary. It seems that the more the taxpayer funds childcare, the greater the cost to parents, the dearer childcare becomes. Last year, the federal government increased taxpayer-funded childcare subsidies. They increased the subsidies, and yet childcare prices across Australia have skyrocketed. We learnt yesterday some Sydney parents are paying $200 a day per child for childcare. It was the Turnbull government which announced so-called childcare reform. That came into force on July 1 last year. We, the taxpayer, forked out another $3.5 billion over 4 years to the $7 billion, B for billion, 7,000 million, we're already contributing as taxpayers to other people's children. Two former taxpayer-funded payments, the childcare rebate and the childcare benefit, were streamlined into a single means-tested childcare quote-unquote subsidy. That subsidy pays 85% of the childcare fees for families earning up to $65,710 a year. So I suppose if you owned a childcare centre, you'd say, well, if the government's paying 85%, I can sort of whack it up a bit. As well, families on $340,000, right up to $340,000 a year, get 20% of childcare fees. So if the taxpayer's paying, I suppose, why not bump up the cost of childcare? Taxpayers subsidising families, bringing home $340,000 a year, that doesn't make sense. Last July, it was reported that childcare centres across the country had jacked up their fees. Immediately, the taxpayer increased his contribution. The fees were jacked up by as much as 10%, or $12 a day. Now, clearly, these price rises have continued. Only a complete fool wouldn't have foreseen this happening. How does anyone imagine taxpayers can afford subsidies to childcare, which only encourage childcare operators to increase the cost of childcare to parents? And instead of wringing our hands over predictable price increases, we should be questioning, I think, why taxpayers are required to fund childcare in the first place. I mean, are we responsible for other people's children? Many people would say that children are the responsibility of parents. I know that sounds tough. Anyway, I'm not in favour of inquiries, but the Australian Childcare Alliance New South Wales is calling for a public inquiry, and I think there is merit in the call. Inquiry into childcare affordability. The CEO, Chiang Lim, has said we can no longer allow all sides of the aisle to ignore the impact of the early childhood sector on families' cost of living pains. And Chiang's on the line. Good morning to you.
Good day, Alan.
How are you?
Good to hear from you again.
Thank you very much. What is this about? How can we increase the subsidies and yet the childcare costs go up?
It's just a crazy situation, isn't it? Look, the system is just not working as it should be. And let's be so honest with ourselves and let's get to the bottom of this. When last year, the Senate Select Committee for Red Tape on childcare, all three sides, the opposition, the government, and the crossbenchers, basically all agreed that the system is not delivering how everyone thought it should be. There were three different solutions, but all basically agreed it's not working. Then at the same month, just so coincidentally, the Centre for Independent Studies published their report saying childcare will continue to be unaffordable unless there is a comprehensive rethink about how we do things. Now, we are just simply in the lead up to both the New South Wales election and the federal election, simply saying what everyone has been thinking. We've got to get to the bottom of this.
Okay, now, you know more about this than I do, because this is your everyday job. What is the problem? I mean, how can what the taxpayer... Well, firstly, the taxpayer is saying, why am I subsidising other people's kids? But forget that, because childcare does exist. Now, how can the taxpayer be increasing his contribution to the cost of childcare and defraying much of the cost, but the childcare proprietor keeps jacking up the cost of childcare? How does that happen?
Well, there may be some operators who are jacking up the cost of childcare because of profiteering. Some of my colleagues made a point last night to say, in a public inquiry, to look into the profiteering motivations of some, not all, is perhaps warranted. And
are the staffing demands over-demanding?
Well, that's a very vexed question. I don't think parents at the moment would appreciate if we were to say, let's start withdrawing the number of staff. I don't think anybody's going to be...
But the ratios are very, very low, aren't they? I mean, in certain parts, as I understand it, you've got to have one staff member for 2 kids or 3 kids or 4 kids or something. Mm-hmm. I mean, is that necessary?
Well, it is more important to actually consider when, let's say, for example, an 80-place childcare center in New South Wales, you must have 4 university-qualified degree-trained teachers, yet in all of full-time, and in all of the states, it's only 1, and that's even part-time.
That's right.
Why are New South Wales children required to have up to 4 times
That's
more
right.
teachers?
That's the guts of it.
New South Wales children 4 times more in need of assistance, or do we produce up to 4 times cleverer children? Where is the evidence of this?
Good on you. That's an excellent point. Look, just ask me a question that parents would be all asking. If you know this scene backwards, Chiang, if you were in charge today, and the argument now is being ventilated, look, the taxpayer's giving more and more money to childcare, and yet the childcare costs are going up and up, what single thing would you do?
Oh, that's a massive minefield, Alan. Massive minefield, and there'll be all sorts of people calling for my blood if I actually said one thing or another.
Yes, right.
The simplest way to get to the bottom of this is let's have a public inquiry. Let's get to the bottom of this. Let's get a New South Wales Upper House parliamentary inquiry, particularly when New South Wales regulations are more burdensome.
Yeah, more onerous.
Any other state.
Yep.
And it is proven time and time again.
So basically you're saying on average New South Wales children are subsidised to the tune of about $456 a year, whereas in Victoria, with less regulation and fewer demands about staff, it's well over $3,000.
That's the subsidy.
That's the subsidy. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Mm. Mm-hmm. All right, an inquiry, I don't know. Let's just see. Who's in charge of childcare in New South Wales, by the way?
The Department of Education.
Right, so let's have a word with Rob Stokes. Good on you. Stay with us, and thank you for your correspondence because you helped me be better informed, Chiang. I'm very grateful.
You're very welcome, Alan.
There we are. That's Chiang. He's the CEO of the Australian Childcare Alliance, New South Wales.